We've established that caw and tuki don't work. Let's try reviewing evolution.
Hello everyone, welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So today we are here again and it's Monday, the regular series. If you're new, Daniel will explain what we will be reviewing or debating today.
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week we are talking about Evolution from 2001, which is a science fiction comedy about two scientists who witnessed a crash of an asteroid and who go to investigate, and it turns out that the asteroid is teeming with life that is rapidly evolving and is threatening to take over the world. So I've seen Evolution on and off a bunch of times over the years. It is just a feel-good movie that is just a comfortable watch and that I've never regretted watching every time I've rewatched it. But I think you just saw it for the first time, right? So what was your takeaway?
It's a film where it's very comedic, right? So, but it was this felt different from the others, as in like the humor in this one kind of felt natural and wasn't forced or exaggerated, like the other ones which I've seen. So yeah, this one I think overall it was a cool little watch. I definitely wouldn't call it a classic, but it was definitely something which I wouldn't go out of my way to watch it, but I wouldn't mind if it came on like TV. I don't think I would watch it in cinema though, but it was definitely cool. It was definitely cool. I think there was a couple of times where I chuckled. The storyline was pretty neat. Overall, I had a cool little experience.
So one of the recurring themes in our conversations has been that movies have just forgotten how to be fun, right? There's always been a place for heavy, introspective, philosophical movies, but there's always also been on the other side of that spectrum. There's been the lighthearted fun where you can just enjoy yourself for 2 hours, right? And that balance seems to have shifted in recent years, right? And to me, this is just one of those examples where this is a movie that is about not a whole lot, right? But it has a premise and it has some ideas and it just sets up a bunch of jokes that land more often than not. And it's just a way to kind of unwind for 2 hours, but it's not stupid. I actually think like this is not like some masterpiece of brilliant satire, but I do think to really be funny, you have to put a lot of work and effort into your jokes. And I think this movie does that in a few different ways, right? So one of them is the creature designs, and then there's also the jokes themselves. I think they really made the main attraction here is the creature designs, right? So what was your impression on that?
This came out in 2001, so I'd say for its time, it was all right. I don't think for me that was the highlight. I think mainly for me the highlight was we'll talk about it later, about the relationship dynamic between the main two characters and how like they kind of like entwined their cultures and how they managed to show on screen. But in terms of like the actual design, I think I kind of see it different from me. I think it wasn't really stand out-ish for me in comparison to what I've seen. Early in the 2000s, early 2000s, and even before that, because the first thing that comes to mind is it, and obviously the monster design of the main, I'm saying the main monster in it. So it was like in comparison to that, yeah, it
Well,
was.
the,
It
the, the
was
comparison that would come to mind for me is The
and Star
Thing.
Wars.
Well,
Sorry,
the Thing, first of all, because that
sorry, the
also,
thing, not the sorry, not it. Sorry, the thing. That's
right.
what I was trying to say.
So
Yeah.
so that because, and the reason for it is that in every scene there's a different creature, right? Like they change every time. In The Thing, it's because it's a shapeshifter that imitates other life, and here it's because it's rapidly evolving, right? So in every scene we are seeing how it's gotten more complex, how it's gotten bigger, how it's gotten more adapted to its environment. And that means in every scene we have, first of all, we have a progression, right? So it starts off relatively innocent with single-celled life forms, and then they're multi-celled, and then there's worms, and by the end of it, we have giant birds and primates and whatever else, right? So we have a natural progression built into the movie, where we have a natural escalation. You don't have to think very hard to escalate from one scene to the next, because next scene over the creatures will be even more dangerous and even more evolved, right? And at the same time, it also means that every scene is something different, right? And when they first go into the cave, I think the second time they go into the cave, the first time they just retrieve a sample, and then the second time they see like all these kinds of different creatures, where there's this one kind of centipede kind of thing where with two heads, so that it can eat more efficiently. And there's this line about is it coming or going, right? And then there's this frog kind of thing that shows up in the house. And so we kind of see we have both a ticking clock and we have an escalation built into it, right? Because the like there's something new every scene, and it's it's working towards something, because at some point it has to break to the surface, and at some point it has to become an open threat, right? And that's when the military shows up, and that's when it becomes a slightly different movie. And that is also something I liked about The Gorge just a few weeks ago, where in every scene, because there the monsters are being mutated by some kind of by a virus, right? And so every life form it comes into contact with gets changed, but every life form gets changed in a different way. So again, we have a premise where it's built into the movie that that something different happens in every scene, right? And I think that is just like a blueprint for coming up with crazy, interesting set pieces and interesting creature designs, and you're always wondering what's around the next corner. At least I thought. Maybe it's just because I'm really into creature features, but a movie where I don't know what's around the next corner, and anything could be around the next corner, but the movie is at least smart enough to make it feel not totally random. Right? Like these, like here, the animals are not random. There's like a natural progression, and they kind of at least seem like more or less like related to each other. Like you can like they're not completely random all over the place, right? And I think that overrules the fact that the CGI is pretty janky, right? This came out in 2001, and that was a time when CGI was being used, but it was becoming better so quickly that after just a year it would look dated. And looking back 24 years later, it definitely is dated, right? It's very clearly not there. It does not look all that great, and just from a pure quality standpoint. But because it's a setup for a fun action scene or a fun comedy scene, I'm totally on board with it. At least that's my takeaway.
I don't even think the CGI looked too bad. I don't know. For me, because even when I said the Godzilla minus one CGI wasn't too bad, you and I have disagreed. So I don't
I
know.
mean,
For
that
me,
doesn't look great by like 2024 standards, right? And that's because of its low budget, right?
but to be fair, even the 2024 budget movies, with a big budget, the CGI isn't that great. Even in Marvel, there'll be times where the CGI doesn't look. It looks kind of off. I forgot what movie
Yeah,
it was. I don't know if it was Ant-Man or something.
pretty much all in the last 5 years have
Yeah,
not
exactly.
not
So
had amazing CGI. But
yeah.
there we know that it's because CGI artists are being rushed, right? And it's a
Mm,
budget issue. CG could be doing much better. And I
mm,
think here they're still limited by their budget, right? Jurassic Park was I think 5 years before this. I think that was 96. So CG definitely was capable of more. I don't know what the budget for this was. So
80, I think.
$80 million in 2001. Not the worst, but I think there's so many creatures they have to design
I
that.
will actually give them the benefit of the doubt as well. Even though I didn't say it was standout-ish for me, I will definitely say it's definitely you can see the creativity in that, and you can tell that the
And for
designs.
me, the creativity is the attraction.
Mm,
Like if a movie just goes in with good faith and shows me, look, here's a bunch of cool stuff we made, and we're holding it together with at least a competent plot, then I
mm,
can have a good time with that,
mm,
even if it's not the most amazing thing I've ever seen. If it's like, and that is I think that is why again The Gorge made such a positive impression on me, is because they were trying, right? There was just a little bit of creativity in there, and they were having some fun with some of the designs. And same thing here. Like I think here it very much shows that that is what their energy went into.
yeah. And the cool stuff that they made in this film, there was progression in that. So like it got bigger, even from the in terms of even like in terms of size and even like in terms of just like the aesthetic. And the fear factor as well. So like just all around it just got bigger and just kept on getting bigger. So that's definitely something that I will commend them for as well. But yeah, especially when it got to like the that I think was that the last creature or was it the oh no the last creature was
The
like the
last one
blob
is
thing.
the giant
Blob.
anus.
Well yeah.
That where they
Yeah.
administer a shampoo enema to kill it.
Yeah, that
We'll
was
get to we'll get to the giant anus. Don't worry. But no, absolutely. Like, and I think you were talking about the primates, like the
yeah.
monkeys. Like those are
Were they monkeys?
Well, there were supposed to be apes, yeah, like
Oh,
proto humans. Like if this had gone for another day, they would have become people, like resembling us.
they borderline look like werewolves.
Yeah, maybe, but like to me, like they had like kind of like a gorilla kind of look to them. But there
Mm.
were like the idea definitely was that they were heading towards something that resembles us. And this movie has this idea that evolution is like a linear thing that has like steps to it, and it's just going through the steps really quickly, which of course is not how it works. But for the purposes of this movie, I think it does its job because it creates this ticking clock kind of thing where if you give this thing enough time, who knows where it will go, right? It's not just randomly flailing around, just and random stuff is happening. Like there's a direction to it. And before we move on to the characters and the humor, which I think is the second big part of this movie, I think the creativity of this and the creature detail, right? The amount of effort that went into making these creatures cool and fun, and that they don't just show up, they don't just walk around like in the background once and then they're gone. They actually have an impact, right? Like these frogs, these frog dogs kind of things that attack these suburban housewives. Those are big enough to actually be a threat, right? And then we've got the birds. Now that they can fly, we've escalated again. And then the primates are heading towards something intelligent, something like us, right? And who knows what that will look like, right? And then we've got first aquatic animals, and then amphibious, and then air breathers. And we know that once they can breathe the air, they can escape the cave system, and then it's all over, right? So I think like that kind of highlights one of the main complaints I've had about so many movies in the past year, where I said I just do not care. Like you're just putting just stuff on screen. Like one of my big nemesis last year was don't worry, I'm not mentioning Madam Web this time. I'm actually mentioning Godzilla X Kong, because on paper Godzilla X Kong should have been amazing, right? Giant gorilla fighting Godzilla in the Hollow Earth, and there's all these pseudoscience stuff going around, and you could do so much with it, right? And these lost civilizations that live there, but there's just zero creativity in that movie, and for that reason, I completely bounced off it. Like there was like a handful of halfway decent creature designs, but they very rarely did anything with it, and it didn't impact the plot at all. It was just like interchangeable. Another one last year was Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire,
Yeah, that was
where the
terrible.
go that like how can you make a Ghostbusters movie and not do some cool stuff with the ghosts,
Mm.
right? Like it's just complete disappointment. And what all of these, and there's other like on the horror front, we had things like Imaginary, and a few others. And for me, the through line with all of these is that they're just lacking creativity. Like nobody sat down and said, okay, let's have some fun with this. Let's make some cool monsters. Let's think about what we established and like what could happen because of this, and what funny situations, or if we're talking about horror, what terrifying situations could come because of this. They're all kind of just lackluster, right? They all kind of just expect to coast on the premise and on the promise of something more interesting. And then a movie like this comes along, and it doesn't take very long for the creatures to show up. And after that, in every other scene, we have an escalation, right? Like something interesting is happening. And even if some of the jokes maybe fall flat or whatever, that there's still that. So I think that is why this movie I think has held up, even though it's quite dated in other aspects. But it's just like entertain me for 2 hours and show me that you've put in some work, and that you have some cool ideas to share with me. And then I can forgive a lot like dated CGI or dated humor or whatever. I don't know. That's just one of my big bugbears about movies these days. That everything is such an assembly line that there's very rarely something where I say, "Oh, that's cool," and then if something does come along where I say, "Oh, that's cool," like it kind of stands out. Like The Gorge is not a great movie, but it's good, or it's showing that some thought and creativity went into parts of it, and that already elevates it above a lot of the other movies. And this movie just does that entirely.
We definitely live in a time where it's one or the other. When it comes to, big budget movies with, that's heavily not relying on CGI, but it's got like a very big CGI presence. It's like they put all their focus in that area without kind of fleshing out and focusing on the other, which I have no idea why, because they have the money to do so. But like, well, you did mention before is because they are rushing them. So yeah, so I definitely, it's something which I don't realize because even when I was, to be fair, with the King Kong and the Godzilla one, I didn't think it was too bad. I think mainly because my main attention was waiting for the main event, which was obviously Kong against Godzilla. So,
But why should you be why should you wait for
well, no,
to be
I
entertained?
understand. I understand. It's just how that's just how I was feeling at the time. Because even with the movie, when the movie came out, it wasn't something that I was highly anticipating. However, the characters themselves, like heavyweight against heavyweight, it's like same with Superman and Batman. Like with those two movies, I wasn't really I didn't think it was going to be a film where it was going to have a great storyline. However, I did think that the showdown is gonna be something worth waiting for, and I do agree. It has to like you should want kind of like everything, as in like you should want a good story as well as a great showdown. But and I think I would have that expectation for a film that I'm really looking forward to. However, Godzilla and Kong, that wasn't really a film I was looking forward to. I was just looking forward to the showdown and how that was gonna look like. And with Superman and Batman, it's not that I wasn't looking forward to it. However, I knew it wasn't going to live up to the expectation of two major big cat like superheroes going against each other. Like stuff like that generally disappoints. Like whenever like you've got like all stars linking up together,
Mm,
it never a good story never ends up coming into fruition. As in like a good movie never
yeah,
it never ends like that. Same with music. When you got two big artists making music together, generally the song isn't great. Do you know what I'm saying? So I kind of had that expectation going into these big movies already. So that's why I was just looking forward mainly to the showdown rather than the story that I'm gonna get. And if the story that I'm gonna get is good as well, then hey man, let's see what I'm saying. I'm not complaining, but yeah, that's
yeah.
the for
But
those two reasons why I was just looking forward to the showdown rather than actually receiving a good story.
yeah, but it's not even just about story, right? Like this doesn't have an amazing story, but it has it has set pieces and spectacle that I think that's kind of got like a bad rap where people think just CGI spectacle has to be dumb and has to be just whatever, it just has to be noise. It's like the Transformers movies kind of started this, where the fights are just spinning metal on the screen for 20 minutes. And to me, a movie can just deliver spectacle. But then that spectacle has to be creative and has to be fun and has to be impressive. And I think for 2001, this is kind of that. And something that leaves me hollow, like Godzilla X Kong, for instance, does that precisely because it does not put in that effort and it does not impress. Even though it looks pretty and even though incredible amounts of money and time and effort went into it, it's the creative spark that's missing. And that is when a movie like this falls flat for me.
There's not really much to say on that besides they need to do better. They need to do
Yep.
better, man.
So that's basically the creature effects, right? Which I think is one of the two big legs. And then the characters and the humor are the other one. And it sounds like that one got more of your attention.
Yeah, yeah, because I think a lot of the times I was scared that they were gonna kind of have like the same personality, the two main characters, because they're both smart, same industry, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of films are kind of like that, where even though they're two different, completely different people, one's black, one's white, a lot of the times the character, like main characters, not a lot of the times, but sometimes, some time more than I would like, where they don't really have an identity, like their own identity. It's like they like a lot of the same things. Whereas in this one, you could tell each of them had culture. You could tell one was a white boy and another one was a black guy. And but they
Mm.
had similarities at the same time as well. It's just that the way that they entwined and the way that they worked together made the jokes even more funnier. Um,
But I
yeah,
thought that
man.
dynamic came more from their different backgrounds in the sense that Ira came from the military and
Mm,
more like he came more from the military and academic aspect, and the joke was that he had to settle for working in a community college, right? Like there's the scene at the start where he's handing back papers, like he's just handing out A's, right? And he just does not care. He's like everybody gets an A, and then there's these two idiots who I'm not sure why they're even in his class. It's probably like a requirement or something. They're definitely not trying to become geologists, right? And he says, "Not my standards may be lower than they used to be, but not even I could bring myself to give an A to this beauty." And he
mm,
quotes this amazing amazing essay, which is the topics is on cells. And the essay about cells is cells are bad. My uncle lives in a cell. It's 10 foot by 12, and he has to read the same boring magazine every day. The end. And that's their biology paper. It's and like that is what he has to deal with. Even though he has he made it to colonel, which is not the highest rank, but it means he was in the army for some time. He was in academia, and he got drummed out of it for like gross ethics violations, which the movie goes into. And then the other guy is Harry, who seems to be just a little bit of a screw up, right? Like he should be at a community college, but he's kind of checked out and then has stopped trying to be more ambitious, right? And then the third one is like a CDC. What's her title? Like she's fairly senior in the CDC, but like she's very clumsy, and like she's a little bit of a screw up, right? But she's a competent researcher who's made it fairly far in the CDC, and those three together have to save the world. So I think that like their dynamic mostly comes from their different backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
Like they do make jokes about the fact that Harry is black, right? Yeah. Like his last name is Block, and somebody refers to him as Mr. Black at one point. Yeah. And he has to play the private while Ira plays the colonel, and he says something like, "No, you take the sample. I'm gonna die first. Like I'm gonna die first if I try this." Like they do make jokes about this, right? But I didn't think like that really drove their relationship or their dynamic.
It's not that for me. It's not that it drove it. It just made it more natural. Because I think like I said, a lot of the times where film has like a heavy comedic tone to it, it can feel very not fake, borderline fake and just theatrical. Whereas this one, it just felt very smooth. Everything about the film felt smooth, from the storyline to character interactions. It didn't feel like it was like a comedy sketch, for example, where a lot of films will kind of like accidentally go in that
they were not cartoons.
Yeah.
Right? I thought they were like exaggerated in terms of their personalities, but they felt like kind of
more. But I don't think they were though. That's the point. I don't think their personalities were exaggerated. That's why it adds to the whole natural element to it. Because like I said, with other movies, it feels like it's exaggerated. But this one, like, because what's the white guy's name? I forgot his name, but the white guy, main actor, he felt very just mellow and chill. And then the other guy, he still wasn't like, he was more like vibrant than obviously his friend, but you could tell that's him, if that makes sense. You can tell there's just realism behind the way that they're both acting in the industry that they're in. They have goofiness, but at the same time, you can tell that they're very intelligent. So I think, they played just the way that they presented themselves. It was very realistic, even though I'm not familiar with that industry, but still, it felt real.
Yeah, I don't know. They both felt like they were overqualified for that setting, but they had no way out, and that is part of that motivation, right? That if they are the ones to like break this big discovery, that will enable them to move on to better things, right? So I think their basic dynamic and their basic motivation, I think, works quite well for this, where they have these technical skills that are needed for the plot, but putting it at a community college also makes them underdogs, so that when the military shows up, we have somebody to root for, even though they're both like not the most senior, but they're like fairly experienced teachers at least, and Ira is more of a scientist. That is really what a lot of the dynamic plays on, so that they have to kind of, it's kind of a little bit like a scavenger hunt, right? Where they go from one step to the next, and they kind of make jokes in between.
And that's what made it like, not, I don't want to use the word watchable, but it made it more like, it made it more engaging, because even though it was a scavenger hunt, they were still trying to kind of like prove themselves, yes, but prove themselves while like they needed to prove themselves in order to save the world, if that makes sense. Yeah. Which made it more like interesting, because if like the more that they're getting pushed back from their responsibilities, which they deserve to have those responsibilities, the more the world's at danger. So that's what made it more engaging and just kind of like the stakes higher.
No, I absolutely agree with that, right? So it kind of goes from them kind of just being screw-ups, and then to they have this amazing discovery, and then there's the military shows up, they have something to rebel against, and then they realize they're the only ones who have the means to stop these creatures, right? Because the military is committed to the wrong path and they're not listening to them. So I think, yeah, and I think then that provides the structure for then the great quotes, which this movie has many, right? Like there's always time for lubricant is one of them, right?
The
Like
classic
some
one.
ice cream, doesn't matter what flavor, it's for my ass, right? Like there's some great quotes in this.
That scene that I could tell was a classic. It was funny.
Yeah, so like this entire movie is just quotable, right?
It made sense for him to go up the alien's anus, to be fair.
Yeah, and then the whole thing culminates in an alien enema where shampoo saves the world. So you might think this whole thing is a Head and Shoulders commercial or like product placement, but
Mhm.
actually, what I think from what I've read, what it actually is that they approached the competition of Head and Shoulders and basically said, "Hey, will you give us some money if we do some product placement?" And they said no. So they said, "Okay, fine, we'll showcase your competition." And that's why the whole thing then ends on a Head and Shoulders commercial.
Did they have
Uh,
a plus? Did it like do anything for the company? Did they end up
I
promoting?
don't know that Head and Shoulders actually paid them to do it. It's more like, okay, fine, if you're not gonna promote, like pay us, then we're gonna promote your
No,
competition.
no, but I'm saying did that like kind of marketed help? Well, free advertisement did that help the actual company that they promoted?
Well, I mean, it's iconic now, right? When people hear Head and Shoulders, they will often think of this movie and the other way around.
Mm.
So I always thought it was just outright product placement, but apparently there's a little bit more to it. But then, like, if you're gonna do, like, it almost feels like a parody of product placement. Normally, companies want their products to be like portrayed in a positive light, and here it saves the world, but it's injected up an alien's anus.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I doubt that would have happened, and that probably might be the reason why the original like shampoo company turned them down. So, but yeah, but it's just like the whole thing is just like culminates in this great joke.
But that was disgusting though when he actually ended up going up the ears. The doctor scene, that's definitely a classic. That definitely was a highlight scene for me. 'Cause I think that the jokes were just flowing,
The
and the way
one
that it was
where
flowing,
he gets bitten by the mosquito and they're talking
yeah,
about
the
amputating the
whole
leg.
yeah, the whole sequence there, that was definitely the highlight. It was
Yeah,
just everyone was just flowing there from the scene itself to the actual jokes that you know what I'm saying that yeah, everything just and even when he was getting support, that whole like them three there, that whole you know what I'm saying, the interaction there, that was amazing.
and I think all of those jokes really are helped by how not exactly cartoonish, but by how broad these characters are. Like they kind of all have idea and they're all kind of screw ups in similar ways. What one character we haven't talked about is Wayne, the aspiring firefighter, who is also just a screw up in his own way, right? He wants to be a firefighter, but he just can't pass the exam, no matter what he does. And so he has to work like on this in this resort. He kind of gets dragged into this. And there's this funny scene where they introduce themselves, and Ira says he's head of the science department. Harry says United States Geological Survey, and Wayne says I took some chemistry in high school.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's not gonna win any comedy awards, right?
Mm,
But I think it works because there's so many of these jokes. They don't all
mm,
have to land in there or don't all have to be amazing, but they kind of underpin this idea of these are just the underdogs trying to figure it out.
mm.
And then there's the military and the courts and all of those who kind of are in the way.
It added spice to the group.
And
It
he's
had
kind of
like
he's kind of like them because he's an underdog and a screw up, and
mm,
he's somebody who's below his potential, but
yeah,
he's not a scientist, right? So it's not quite the same as all the other
yeah,
characters. And
yeah.
so, like, if they were all the same kind of character, it would get very boring very quickly.
Mm,
And I think Allison is similar, where she's like again a different version of the same idea. It's not so much like she's not so much the underachiever, but like her clumsiness and stuff like that kind of makes her more endearing. And then when she walks away from her good career to do the right thing, that makes her more sympathetic.
she kind of like acted in a good way, as in like even though she had a hard exterior, there was obviously scenes where you could tell that she had a soft side, and the more that it softened, obviously the more that you saw her flourish into the character that she
Mhm.
ended up becoming, which it was good acting. Because she had from facial expressions that she was expressing, especially in the scene, well, in the scene where she was watching, what was it? She was watching the two in where the monsters were from
Hmm.
the CCTV. That was a funny scene. That was actually a good scene. But that was a scene where you kind of see like her that there's actually life in her character. Because I think that was the moment. Because before that, she was pretty much introduced as someone which was she was a bit clumsy obviously when she first fell, but she was like uptight-ish, just
Hmm.
strictly business. And then in that scene there, that's when you could kind of see that, oh, okay, she's got a bit of personality because she wasn't like totally pissed, but you could tell she was like,
But
it was actually,
they did
she
get a
was,
rise out of her, right? And
yeah,
that's where
yeah,
she
kind of like a
shows.
competitive rise, if that makes sense. It was like she wanted to kind of like show him that she's not that type of person just from the way
Mm,
that she was reacting. So I was like, oh, okay, there's
yeah.
more to this. There's more to this lady.
And then that scene is part of the humor that I think has at least gets criticized for having not aged all that well, right? Where basically they are essentially having this extended conversation about how uptight she is and so on, right? And like in general, there's just but there's a bunch of stuff in this where this is very clearly early 2000s, right? Like when they run into the ex girlfriend, like Ira's ex girlfriend, who's now with the sheriff, and it I still don't get what the point of that was, other than the writers thought it was funny. Where essentially I forget why she's upset with him, but he's upset because she's now with somebody else, and there's this whole thing about giving back his shirt, so she just hands him back the shirt like in the diner, and it's like this is early 2000s comedy, and that's one where I said, okay, fine, we're gonna do this. Like, wake me up in 2 minutes when it's over. And there's like one or two others like this, but I think if it's like 95% aged well, and there's a couple of things in there 24 years later, where I say, okay, this is not the most amazing thing. For me, it's mostly that there's a lack of a joke, right? The thing with with the ex girlfriend, I don't even know what the joke is.
Yeah, I
You
don't
know what I
know.
mean? Like
Yeah,
it just takes up space. And it's like, can you not cut this?
maybe
Uh,
maybe that's just a scene to kind of like just show more of what obviously the character's like in terms of like because he even though he is like he works in a scientific field, a field which is like you wouldn't really associate those type of people to be kind of like a playboy. He still had
mhm.
kind of like something about him, and obviously that just kind of like adds to it, to kind of reinforce that he is that type of guy that could get obviously the main actress of her name. But yeah, so maybe that was just like a reinforcing scene to kind of just to reinforce his character, which is kind of like a playboy ish.
A little bit, yeah. But they could have made it funny.
Yeah,
Anyway, but that's I think that's kind of the big criticism. Like when you look up like discourse around this movie, that's kind of the one big criticism that like a few of the jokes have not aged all that well, because it's just this is what was funny in 2001 and it isn't today. And a lot of the time, I will defend stuff like this if it's actually funny or if there's an actual quality joke there. And there just isn't. Right? It's just crazy ex girlfriend. Isn't that funny? Right? So it's not all perfect, but honestly, if after 24 years it holds up this well, that there's a couple of things where you have to say, okay, this doesn't interest anymore, or this isn't funny anymore. If you're down to like 90-95%, that's not that bad. I think you can still have a really good time with this. Any other thoughts on evolution?
overall, it like I said, it was definitely. I obviously after today's conversation, I can give more credit to just monster designs. Like at face value, first time watching it, and like I said, I thought it was cool, but it just wasn't like a highlight for me. But obviously, after speaking, it's like okay, you do you not kind of, you do see the progression, and you do see the difference of monsters in here in this film in comparison to like any other film. There's definitely, you can see the creative, you can see that there's passion behind obviously the monsters in terms of like the creativity behind it. So I definitely will give that credit. Like I said, all in all, I definitely enjoyed character interactions in this one. Which is, I wouldn't say it's rare to say, but I haven't said it in quite like in I wouldn't say quite a long time. I haven't said it as often as you would think in terms of like the newer films. So with this one, I definitely do give it a an applaud into regarding that, because it was definitely engaging just watching them, and it flowed so good in terms of it flowed very well, and it made sense. It made sense, and just how different personalities came as one and how it worked, even though they were so different. So yeah, I think overall I had a like I said, I still had I had a cool means good for me guys in case you don't know, but I had a good experience. Let me say good experience. I had a good experience watching this. I would recommend it. If it was in cinema, I don't know if I'd recommend it because these type of movies aren't really my type of movies, but I am getting into it. I think ever since we started this podcast, I have been watching more of these type of films. When I say these type of films, I mean like films with like a heavy comedic tone to it. But yeah, but I would definitely recommend it if it's like on TV or maybe even on streaming. But I'm just thinking if it was 2001 and it came on cinema, would I recommend it in that, you know, aspect? But yeah, all in all, good movie, good time.
Yeah, so I mean, now we're looking at this, look back at this 24 years later, right? But this came out in June 2001, and just a few examples of what came out in June 2001: Tomb Raider, Artificial Intelligence, Swordfish, Fast and the Furious. I guess it's the first one. The Disney Atlantis movie, right? So this, and there's a whole bunch of others. So my point here is this movie came up against a bunch of fairly stiff competition. And I think at the time it did not make a whole bunch of money, right? So this made 98 million against an $80 million budget, so a failure. And I don't think you can play the game of what if this came out today, because this is so driven by the special effects that it would simply not be the same movie if you did it today, right? But I think if you made a movie like this today, I think it would actually, like with the same kinds of humor and the structure and the creature effects, just with 2025 technology applied, I think it would kind of clean up, because it would be it would be like just something fun to
Yeah.
watch, and something to spark your imagination, and something to get you like walk out of the movie like having felt good. So I think it really holds up in that sense. And I think all you have to do is kind of excuse the fact that these are 24-year-old special effects, right? And if you can live with that, then I think that's a good. The movie is a good time.
Yeah.
And I think that's like I'm really hesitant to call this a good movie, right? This is not an art piece. This is not a genius piece of filmmaking. This is just a fun ride. But I think for what it is, and I don't normally like that phrase "for what it is" because that's kind of like damning with faint praise, right? But considering what it wants to do, it really achieves that, I think, and that goes a long way for a movie, I think. All right, should we wrap it up?
All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode. If you liked what you watched, please share, subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of Evolution, and let us know what you disagreed with and agreed with in today's podcast review, whatever you want to call it.
So if you liked this video, tell a friend, and if you hated this video, tell an enemy.
You heard it here first, guys. The Eye of the Storm podcast. We'll catch you next week. Au revoir.
Bye bye.